The man charged with murdering his mother in Grover Beach last fall took the stand during his trial today. Prosecutors say 27-year-old Levente Laszlo Lazar lived in Indiana and killed his mother for financial gain.
In a quiet, unsuspecting neighborhood in Grover Beach, California, a tragedy unfolded that would leave the community reeling for years to come. Athena Valentiny, a 64-year-old nurse who had spent her life caring for others with a heart full of compassion, was found brutally murdered in her own home. The scene was horrifying. A woman who had dedicated herself to helping others, left in a pool of blood, her life violently taken. But the true shock wasn't just the murder itself, it was the cold, unimaginable betrayal that came with it. The killer wasn't a stranger or some faceless criminal. It was her own flesh and blood. Her son. The man she had raised, trusted, and loved. The investigation that followed revealed a chilling story of greed, manipulation, and a son so desperate for money that he was willing to take his mother's life to claim it. This is the story of Athena Valentiny. Her life stolen, her family torn apart, and the gut-wrenching truth behind a son's betrayal. A story that will leave you questioning just how far a person can go when driven by selfish desire, and how the bond of family can be shattered in the most horrifying of ways.
Did you hear any fighting or anything like that? Any loud noises?
No, because I work till 9 o'clock.
Okay.
And she never left the truck in there. She always put his car inside of the garage, but last night.
So she never does? She never...
Leave. She put on the day, but on the night she always put it inside of the garage.
Oh, I get it.
Last night is there.
Other than that, did you see anybody around other than her?
No.
The air in Grover Beach, California, was crisp on October 25, 2018, when Athena Valentiny's colleagues began to worry. Athena, a 64-year-old licensed vocational nurse who had dedicated her life to caring for others, had failed to show up for work. Known for her strong, loving, and compassionate nature, Athena had always been reliable, never missing a day at the California Men's Colony State Prison, where she had become a beloved figure. The absence seemed uncharacteristic, and a welfare check was called for. Little did anyone know, this would be the day her life would be violently taken from her.
Hi.
Hello, are you Lazar? Or Mr. Lazar?
Yeah, Levente Lazar.
Okay, is Miss Valentini your mother?
Yes.
I was contacted this afternoon by the St. Louis Obispo County Sheriff's Department or District Attorney's Office, I don't remember which one.
Okay.
Your mother's passed away. I'm very, very sorry for that, obviously.
What happened?
I don't know. They didn't really give me any details. They just asked that we come and make a notification to you.
Okay.
When police arrived at her condominium, they found Athena's lifeless body in her bedroom. Her throat and upper extremities were riddled with deep, savage wounds, the blood pooling around her in a grim reminder of the brutality that had unfolded there. The scene was one of horror, no signs of forced entry, which suggested that Athena had known her killer. But what struck investigators as particularly unusual was the disappearance of her dog. Her loyal companion, often by her side, was nowhere to be found. It was a detail that would later prove to be a pivotal clue. Athena had been more than just a nurse. She was a nurturing spirit who gave her all to those around her. Her colleagues described her as someone who would go above and beyond for her patients, treating them not just as individuals in need of medical care, but as people deserving of compassion and dignity. Outside of work, she was no different. She loved simple pleasures. Walking her dog along the beach, tending to her small garden, and spending time with close friends. She had a quiet life, but it was full of warmth and love for those she held dear. As investigators began piecing together the events leading to her death, the investigation quickly turned towards Athena's son, Levente Laszlo Lazar. Levente, who had traveled from Bloomington, Indiana to California just days before the murder, seemed to have a connection to the crime. He had no prior criminal history, but his financial struggles were well known. Having squandered an inheritance of over $40,000 and accumulated significant credit card debt, Levente had been relying on his mother for both emotional and financial support. But as detectives dug deeper, it became clear that Levente had far darker intentions. digital forensics would prove crucial in the case. Authorities discovered that Levente had purchased a burner phone, which he used to conceal his movements. Investigators were able to trace his route to Grover Beach through cell tower data, confirming that he had been in the area at the time of the murder. Surveillance footage from Athena's condominium complex showed Levente arriving at her residence in the late afternoon and leaving hours later, his presence now undeniable. Even more damning were the digital traces left behind. Before police had even publicly confirmed Athena's death, Levente was already searching online for news about her murder and looking up inheritance laws. This was a chilling indication of his premeditated plan, one fueled by a desire for financial gain. Investigators also discovered that Levente had been in possession of his mother's original will, which named him as the sole beneficiary. The motive for murder became clear. Athena Valentiny had been murdered not just for her life, but for what she could provide him after her death. As the investigation progressed, Levente's story became increasingly inconsistent. When questioned by authorities, he denied any involvement in his mother's death, even going so far as to deny ownership of the burner phone. But the evidence was overwhelming. His cell phone records, surveillance footage, and internet searches painted a clear picture of a son who had planned his mother's murder for financial gain. The cruelty of his actions, the betrayal of a mother who had given him everything, was unfathomable. Levente Laszlo Lazar was arrested on November 6, 2018, in Indiana. By then, the evidence against him had become irrefutable. After being extradited to California, he stood trial for the premeditated murder of his mother. The prosecution presented a case that left no doubt in the minds of the jury. They showed how Levente's financial troubles, his search for inheritance laws, and his possession of Athena's will all pointed to a carefully orchestrated plan to murder her and claim her estate. The jury found him guilty of first-degree murder with special circumstances of financial gain, and in December 2019, Levente was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The conviction brought some measure of justice to those who had known and loved Athena Valentiny. The caring nurse and devoted mother had been stolen from them in a moment of selfishness and greed. Levente's betrayal had not only destroyed a life, but had shattered the trust between mother and son. Though Athena's death would never be undone, the strength of the investigation and the prosecution's relentless pursuit of justice ensured that her murderer would never be free again. Levente Laszlo Lazar now sits in prison, serving out a life sentence for the murder of his mother. Despite his conviction, some still wonder if the true extent of his guilt has been fully understood. His appeal is expected, but it won't change the fact that a son's betrayal cost Athena Valentiny her life. And while justice may have been served, the pain of her loss lingers in the hearts of those who knew her best. As the gavel fell in the courtroom, a life sentence was handed down, but the damage was already done. Athena Valentiny's life was brutally stolen, not by a stranger, but by the one person who should have protected her most, her own son. In the end, no amount of justice could ever undo the pain of that betrayal. A mother's love, once unconditional, had been repaid with cold, calculated cruelty. Levente Laszlo Lazar's quest for financial gain left a family in pieces, a community in shock, and a woman who had spent her life caring for others, lost forever. As we reflect on Athena's story, we're reminded of the lengths some will go to in the pursuit of greed, and the heartbreaking reality that sometimes the greatest threat comes from within. Athena's legacy, though stolen from her too soon, lives on in the memories of those who knew her as a kind, loving soul. But for Levente, there will be no redemption. Just the cold truth that he took everything from the one person who loved him unconditionally. This is a story of love betrayed, of a family destroyed, and of a mother's life cut short by the very hands that should have protected her. May we remember Athena Valentiny not just for the way she died, but for the life she lived and the love she gave.